Hello and welcome to this first lecture in our series of lectures on Thomas Jefferson. This lecture is entitled Thomas Jefferson, American Icon. Where to begin with a topic as rich and multifaceted as Jefferson and his world? In this introductory lecture, Mr. Onuf has two basic goals. First, he wants to convey at the outset some sense of why Jefferson remains one of the most important, complex, and controversial figures in all of American history. After all, why should you bother taking an entire course dedicated to studying the life and times of this one person? You deserve an answer to this question, and Mr. Onuf makes the case brilliantly. Second, the lecture aims to provide a brief overview of how Jefferson's reputation has been in flux, rising and falling numerous times from his own time until the present day, some 2 centuries later. You may be surprised to learn how Americans in different eras have interpreted Jefferson and his legacy. Put simply, they haven't always been enamored with the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence and served as the third president. The lecture can be divided into 4 parts. Mr. Onuf begins in part 1 by situating Jefferson in the context of the Enlightenment, an 18th century intellectual movement whose ultimate objective was nothing less than the improvement of all mankind. Jefferson saw himself as a leading proponent of this age of reason, as he sought to overturn traditional conceptions of politics and government. In the place of conventional understandings of society and order, Jefferson offered a stunning vision of the equality of all men. But not everyone accepted Jefferson's views. In part 2, Mr. Onuf presents some of the critiques that have been leveled at Jefferson and his ideas. Today, we might be inclined to conclude that inequality rather than equality characterizes our society. In the early 19th century, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham dismissed the Jeffersonian view of natural rights as utter nonsense, while others, observing the violent and radical revolutions occurring in places such as France and Haiti, decided that democracy was dangerous and unrealistic. In part 3, we learn how, in the midst of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln revived Jefferson's reputation. Yet we also learn that Jefferson's status as a great American founder continued to oscillate throughout the later 19th and into the 20th century in response to developments at home and abroad. By the late 20th century, it was possible to see Jefferson as both a hypocrite and a visionary. We'll ask why that's so. Mr. Onuf concludes his lecture in part 4 by offering a couple key points to keep in mind as we begin our attempt to understand Jefferson and his world. After reminding us that we need to acknowledge the many differences between Jefferson's world and our own, Mr. Onuf introduces an important theme, a paradox that we will trace throughout the course. Jefferson's invention of a new world in America that he believes simultaneously repudiates and revives the civilization of the old world of Europe. It's this tension between valuing the past and looking toward the future that lies at the heart of the 2 concepts of exceptionalism that can be found in Jefferson's thought. By the end of this lecture, then, you should be able to do a couple things. First, you should be able to explain when and why Jefferson's reputation was generally held in relatively high or relatively low regard. Second, you should be able to offer a few reasons why studying Jefferson is a worthwhile enterprise for us today. Imagine you have a skeptical friend who doesn't understand why you're taking a course about Jefferson. What would you tell her?